Welcome, this is Lafay. Today's conversation is one of those topics that usually divides people into two camps. On one side, you have people who say, your childhood shapes everything. Your parents, your environment, your trauma, they determine who you become. On the other side, you have people who say, enough excuses. Everybody has problems. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your life. So the question is, does family background really matter? Or is it just an excuse people use to avoid accountability? And perhaps an even tougher question, can people stop blaming trauma and upbringing for who they become? Let's talk about it. First, let's be honest. Family background absolutely matters. Anyone who says it doesn't is ignoring reality. A child raised in a loving home is starting life from a different position than a child raised in violence, neglect, poverty, or chaos. That isn't an opinion, that's a fact. The way we think about ourselves, trust people, manage emotions, and even respond to stress is heavily influenced by our early experiences. If you grew up hearing, you are smart, you are loved, you can do anything, that affects you. You are useless, you will never amount to anything, nobody cares about you. That affects you too. So yes, family background matters. The real question is, how long should it matter? Because here's where things get interesting. Many people spend years explaining their problems, but very few spend years solving them. There is a huge difference between an explanation and an excuse. For example, I have trust issues because I was betrayed. That's an explanation. But saying, I'll never have healthy relationships because I was betrayed, now it becomes an excuse. One helps us understand the problem, the other gives us permission to keep the problem. Let's use trauma as an example. Trauma is real. Psychological wounds are real. Nobody chooses to be hurt. Nobody chooses abusive parents. Nobody chooses neglect. Nobody chooses childhood poverty. But eventually, every adult reaches a crossroads. The crossroads where life asks, what are you going to do with the cards you've been dealt? Not, what cards were you given? But, what are you going to do now? Think about this. Two people can grow up in the exact same difficult environment. Same neighborhood, same poverty, same parents, same struggles, yet one becomes successful, healthy, and disciplined. The other becomes bitter, angry, and destructive. Why? If upbringing was the only factor, both outcomes should be identical. Clearly, something else is involved. Choices, responsibility, personal growth, self-awareness, and sometimes pure determination. One thing I think society gets wrong today is that we have become very good at identifying wounds, but not always good at healing them. We diagnose, we explain, we analyze, we label, but healing requires work. Therapy is work, forgiveness is work, discipline is work, changing habits is work, breaking generational cycles is work, and unfortunately is much harder than blame. Now let me be careful here. Taking responsibility does not mean pretending trauma never happened. It doesn't mean saying, just get over it. That's not realistic. Some wounds are deep. Some people carry pain for decades. Your past may explain your behavior, but it does not justify staying there forever. That's a hard truth, but it's also an empowering truth. Because if your past completely controls your future, then you're powerless. And if you're powerless, there's no hope. But if your choices matter, then there is hope. One of the most inspiring things about human beings is our ability to rewrite our stories. History is full of people who came from broken homes, people who experienced trauma. Your past may explain your behavior, but it does not justify staying there forever. That's a hard truth, but it's also an empowering truth. Maybe the better question isn't, does family background matter? Of course it matters. The better question is, at what point do I stop being a victim of my past? That's the real conversation, because nobody chooses where they start. But eventually, we all participate in where we end up. Not perfectly, not equally, not easily. But we do participate. And that participation is where responsibility begins. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe family background has too much influence on who we become? Or do you think people sometimes use trauma and upbringing as a shield from accountability? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, remember, your story may begin with other people's decisions, but the rest of the chapters are still being written by you. See you in the next episode.